The dust swirled across the empty street as Olivia Langley clutched her threadbare shawl tighter around her trembling shoulders, the whispers following her like shadows as she made her way through Trinidad, Colorado, in the spring of 1875. The journey west had stripped her of everything: her reputation, her family's good name, and whatever small measure of dignity she'd managed to preserve after the scandal that had forced her from Boston. All that remained was the shame that colored her cheeks each time a curious glance lingered too long on her face. Trinidad wasn't much to look at: a collection of wooden structures straddling the line between civilization and wilderness, but it represented her last chance. The stagecoach had deposited her here with nothing but a small carpet bag containing her remaining possessions, a faded daguerreotype of her parents, a change of clothes, and $7.35 to her name. It would have to be enough. Olivia kept her eyes fixed on the boardwalk ahead, ignoring the stares of the townspeople who paused in their activities to assess the newcomer. A woman traveling alone was unusual enough to draw attention, especially one who carried herself with the unmistakable bearing of Eastern refinement, however diminished by hardship. "Excuse me," she said, approaching an older woman arranging goods in front of a general store. "Could you direct me to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house?" The woman's eyes narrowed, taking in Olivia's travel-worn appearance. "3 blocks down, then right at the church. Can't miss it." She leaned forward slightly. "Though I should warn you, Mrs. Holloway's particular about who she takes in." Respectable establishment and all, Olivia swallowed hard, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for your concern." The boarding house stood apart from the other buildings, a 2-story structure with a small garden attempting to soften its severe lines. Olivia straightened her back, tucked a stray lock of auburn hair beneath her bonnet, and climbed the steps. Each footfall seemed to echo her diminishing hope. Mrs. Holloway proved to be a stern-faced woman with iron-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her inspection of Olivia was thorough and unforgiving. "References?" she demanded after Olivia had explained her need for lodging. "I'm afraid I don't have any, madam. I've come from Boston, and no references, no room," Mrs. Holloway said flatly. "This is a respectable house." "Please," Olivia said, desperation creeping into her voice. "I can pay for a week in advance. I'll find employment immediately." A young woman alone, no references, appearing out of nowhere. Mrs. Holloway's mouth tightened into a thin line. "I've heard enough stories to know better." "Good day, Miss Langley." The door closed with finality, leaving Olivia on the porch with the afternoon sun beating down on her bonneted head. She blinked rapidly, refusing to give in to the tears threatening to spill. Crying wouldn't help. Nothing would change what had happened in Boston, or the fact that she was now alone in a strange town with few options. She made her way back toward the main street, clutching her carpet bag tighter. The saloon at the corner was doing brisk business, and Olivia quickened her pace as she passed, ignoring the calls from 2 men lounging outside. The last thing she needed was to compound her troubles by appearing to associate with such establishments. The sign for the Trinity Hotel caught her attention. Perhaps they needed help with cleaning or cooking. Summoning her courage, she pushed through the front door. The hotel lobby was modestly appointed but clean, with a small desk where a balding man with spectacles was reviewing a ledger. "Excuse me, sir," Olivia said. "I was wondering if you might be hiring." The man looked up, his expression neutral. "Not at present, miss, though Peterson's restaurant down the street might be. They've been short-handed since their waitress married and moved to Denver." "Thank you," Olivia said, her voice wavering slightly. "I appreciate the information." As she turned to leave, the door swung open and a tall man entered, bringing with him the scent of horses, leather, and open plains. Olivia stepped aside, keeping her eyes downcast as was proper, but not before noticing his sun-browned skin and the quiet confidence in his bearing. "Afternoon, Lucas," the hotel clerk called. "Henry," the man acknowledged with a nod. His voice was deep and measured, carrying the slight drawl common to the region. Olivia slipped past him and back onto the street, aware of the day slipping away from her. Without lodging or employment secured, her situation was growing dire. The stagecoach office was closed until morning, and even if it wasn't, she had nowhere to go and insufficient funds to get there. Peterson's restaurant proved to be a simple establishment with checkered tablecloths and the aroma of stew simmering in the kitchen. The owner, a rotund man with a bushy mustache, listened to her inquiry with obvious skepticism. "Ever worked in a restaurant before?" "No, sir, but I'm a quick learner and can't use you," he interrupted. "Need someone experienced, got customers that expect certain standards." Olivia nodded stiffly and retreated, her options dwindling with each rejection. The afternoon was fading into evening, and she had yet to secure either lodging or employment. A chill ran through her that had nothing to do with the cooling temperature. Desperate, she approached the mercantile just as the proprietor was preparing to close for the day. "We don't need help," the woman said before Olivia could even make her request. "And if you're thinking of asking about a place to stay, you might as well save your breath." News travels fast in Trinidad. If Edna Holloway turned you away, no decent household will take you in. Olivia's chest tightened. "I don't understand. I've done nothing wrong." The woman's expression softened slightly. "Maybe not, dear, but a young woman traveling alone without references." "People talk. There's the church, of course. Reverend Miller might let you stay there for the night, but after that." The church was dark when Olivia arrived, and no amount of knocking brought anyone to the door. With night falling, she found herself standing in the town square, her options exhausted. The saloon was still busy, light and raucous laughter spilling from its windows. For a moment, she considered they might need someone to clean or serve, but she knew what such employment would do to her already tattered reputation. Instead, she found herself drawn to the small livery stable at the edge of town. It wasn't ideal, but at least she could find shelter among the hay for the night. Tomorrow she would try again, perhaps in the next town over if necessary. The stable was quiet, most of the stalls occupied by horses settling in for the night. Olivia crept toward the back, where a pile of clean hay offered the promise of a somewhat comfortable bed. She set down her carpet bag and sank onto the makeshift bedding, exhaustion overtaking her. "That's not a bed for a lady." Olivia startled, scrambling to her feet at the sound of the deep voice. Standing in the doorway was the man she'd seen at the hotel earlier. Lucas, the clerk, had called him. In the lantern light, she could see him more clearly, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "I'm sorry," she stammered. "I didn't mean to trespass. I'll go." "And where exactly will you go?" he asked, his tone not unkind. "Trinidad's not big on options after sundown. I'll find somewhere," she said, gathering her carpet bag with as much dignity as she could muster. "I don't believe you will," he replied. "Not tonight, at any rate. Mrs. Holloway's already spread word about the mysterious Boston woman with no references and a story full of holes." Olivia's shoulders slumped. "My story isn't full of holes. It's simply not one I care to share with strangers." Lucas Vance, for that was his name. Lucas Vance studied her with those steady eyes. He wasn't a man given to hasty judgments or impulsive decisions. 10 years of ranching in Colorado territory had taught him the value of careful assessment. "My sister keeps house for me at the Double V," he said after a moment. "She could use some help, and we've got a spare room. It's honest work if you're willing." Olivia stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you offer me employment when you know nothing about me?" "I know enough," he said simply. "I know you're too proud to beg and too decent to choose easier but less respectable options. I know you're out of choices, and I know my sister would have my hide if she found out I left a woman to sleep in a stable when we have a perfectly good bed sitting empty." A slight smile softened his weathered features. "Besides, Clara's been after me to find help since she married Tom last year. Says running the house and helping with the ranch is too much now that they're expecting." It could be a trap, Olivia thought. But something in his straightforward manner and clear gaze suggested otherwise. "And what choice did she truly have? What would my duties entail?" she asked, still hesitant. "Cooking, cleaning, helping Clara with whatever needs doing around the house," Lucas said. "It's not fancy work, but it's honest. Room and board plus $20 a month. It was a fair offer, more than fair given her circumstances. Still, Olivia hesitated. "Your sister won't object to bringing a stranger into your home," Lucas's mouth quirked up at one corner. "Clara's been trying to fill that spare room for months, said just yesterday she'd take anyone with 2 hands and a willingness to work." He gestured toward the stable door. "My wagon's outside if you're agreeable." Olivia drew a deep breath. This man, this cowboy, was offering her a chance when no one else would. It might not be the life she'd once imagined for herself, but it was a starting point. "I accept your offer, Mr. Vance," she said formally, "and I thank you for your kindness." "Lucas," he corrected. "If we're going to be living under the same roof, might as well use my given name." The ride to the Double V Ranch was mostly silent. Olivia was too exhausted and overwhelmed to maintain conversation, and Lucas seemed comfortable with quiet. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust, illuminating the rolling landscape that surrounded Trinidad. "It's beautiful," Olivia murmured, almost to herself. "Gets under your skin," Lucas agreed. "Took me a while to see it when I first came west. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. How long have you had your ranch?" "Going on 10 years. Came out here with my father and sister after the war, started with 50 acres and a dream." He glanced at her. "What brought you west, Miss Langley?" "Olivia," she said, returning his earlier courtesy. "And necessity brought me west. There was nothing left for me in Boston." Lucas nodded, asking no further questions, for which Olivia was grateful. The scandal that had driven her from her home was still too raw, too painful to discuss. The Double V Ranch appeared in the distance, a sprawling main house with several outbuildings clustered nearby. A lantern burned in the window, casting a warm glow against the night. "Clara's waiting up," Lucas said, guiding the wagon toward the house. As they approached, the front door opened, and a young woman stepped onto the porch. Clara Vance Miller was several years younger than her brother, with the same dark hair and direct gaze, though her features were softer, more rounded, especially now with the early signs of pregnancy just beginning to show. "Lucas Vance, where have you been?" "Tom and I were about to send out a search party," she called, then stopped as she noticed Olivia. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company." Lucas helped Olivia down from the wagon before answering. "Clara, this is Miss Olivia Langley from Boston. She's going to help you with the house, if that suits." Clara's face lit up. "If that suits, Lucas, I've been begging you for help for months." She turned to Olivia with a warm smile. "You poor thing, you must be exhausted. Come inside, I've got stew keeping warm on the stove." The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly comfortable, with solid furniture and touches of femininity in the curtains and cushions that spoke of Clara's influence. A tall, lanky man rose from a chair by the fire as they entered. "Tom Miller," he introduced himself with a friendly nod. "Clara's husband and reluctant ranch hand. Tom's a schoolteacher by trade," Clara explained, guiding Olivia to a chair at the table. "He only helps with the ranch when Lucas is short-handed, which is most of the time." "Speaking of which," Lucas said, "we've got to move the herd to the north pasture tomorrow. The grass is getting thin where they are." As the men discussed ranch business, Clara served Olivia a bowl of stew and a thick slice of bread. "Eat now, questions later," she said firmly. "You look like you haven't had a proper meal in days." It was true. Olivia had been rationing her food carefully during her journey, making each meager meal stretch as far as possible. The rich stew, full of tender beef and vegetables, was the most delicious thing she'd tasted in weeks. "Thank you," she said between careful bites. "This is wonderful," Clara beamed. "Lucas told me you'd had some trouble finding accommodations in town." Olivia hesitated, setting down her spoon. "I should be honest with you, Mrs. Miller. I came to Trinidad with no references and very little money." "I'm afraid my reputation is your own business," Clara interrupted gently. "We all have pasts, Miss Langley. What matters here is the present and how you conduct yourself." She patted Olivia's hand. "Besides, Lucas has always been a good judge of character. If he brought you home, that's recommendation enough for me." Across the room, Lucas met Olivia's gaze briefly, his expression unreadable, before returning to his conversation with Tom. After the meal, Clara showed Olivia to a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. "It's not fancy," she apologized, "but the mattress is new and I aired the linens just yesterday." "It's perfect," Olivia said sincerely. After nearly sleeping in a stable, the simple room with its iron bedstead and patchwork quilt seemed like luxury. "Well, get some rest," Clara said, squeezing her arm. "Tomorrow I'll show you around properly and we can discuss your duties." Left alone, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, the events of the day catching up with her. She had arrived in Trinidad with nothing but shame and a desperate need for a fresh start. Instead of the rejection she had come to expect, she had found unexpected kindness in the form of Lucas Vance and his sister. For the first time since leaving Boston, Olivia allowed herself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, she might find a place to belong. Morning came early at the Double V Ranch. Olivia woke to the sounds of movement in the kitchen and the aroma of coffee brewing. She dressed quickly in her second dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days, and made her way to the kitchen, eager to begin earning her keep. Clara was at the stove, expertly flipping hot cakes while a pot of beans simmered nearby. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in weeks," Olivia admitted. "What can I do to help?" "You can start by setting the table. The men will be in from the barn any minute, and they're always starving." As Olivia arranged plates and cutlery on the large oak table, she couldn't help but compare this simple morning routine to the formal breakfasts of her previous life in Boston, with servants attending to every detail. Here, there was work to be done by everyone, but there was also a warmth and genuineness that had often been lacking in the rigid social circles of her past. Lucas and Tom entered, bringing with them the fresh scents of morning air and leather. Both nodded greetings to Olivia as they washed up at the basin by the door. "Hope you're ready for a busy day," Clara said to Olivia as they all sat down to breakfast. "Mondays are washing days, and with these two bringing in dirt like it's a competition, we've got our work cut out for us." Tom grinned. "It's not dirt, it's honest soil. Tell her, Lucas." "It's dirt," Lucas replied, the corner of his mouth twitching. "And Clara's right, we do track in more than our share." He glanced at Olivia. "You settling in all right?" "Yes, thank you," she said, surprised by his concern. "Everything is fine." After breakfast, the men headed out to begin the day's ranch work, while Clara showed Olivia the routines of the household. There was indeed a mountain of laundry to be done, followed by bread to bake, floors to sweep, and a host of other tasks that kept them busy well into the afternoon. Despite the hard work, Olivia found herself enjoying the simple, straightforward nature of her duties. There were no social calls to navigate, no complex rules of etiquette to observe, just the satisfaction of completing necessary tasks alongside a woman who treated her with kindness and respect. "You're a godsend," Clara declared as they hung the last of the washing on the line behind the house. "I've been struggling to keep up since the morning sickness started." "I'm happy to help," Olivia said sincerely. "After all, you and your brother have been exceptionally kind to me." Clara studied her for a moment. "Lucas doesn't often take to strangers, you know. He's always been cautious about who he lets close, especially since Ma and Pa passed." "I gathered he's a private person," Olivia said carefully. "He is that, but he's also the best man I know next to Tom." Clara gathered up the empty basket. "Whatever brought you west, Olivia, and I'm not asking. Mind you, I hope you'll find what you're looking for here." "I hope so too," Olivia murmured. As the days passed, Olivia settled into the rhythm of ranch life. The work was hard but satisfying, and Clara proved to be not just an employer but a friend, sharing stories and laughter as they went about their daily tasks. Tom, too, was unfailingly kind, often bringing wildflowers for both women when he returned from his rides to and from the schoolhouse where he taught. Lucas remained something of an enigma. He was unfailingly polite, and Olivia occasionally caught him watching her with those thoughtful dark eyes, but he maintained a certain distance. He was often gone before dawn and returned after dark, the demands of the ranch keeping him busy from sunup to sundown. A week into her stay, Olivia was hanging laundry when she noticed a rider approaching fast. Lucas, who had been mending a fence nearby, straightened up, his hand moving instinctively to the pistol at his hip. The rider turned out to be a young ranch hand named Jed, his face flushed with exertion and worry. "Mr. Vance, rustlers hit the Dawson place last night, took half their herd and shot old man Dawson when he tried to stop them." Lucas's expression hardened. "Is he alive?" "Yes, sir." "Doc's with him now, but it don't look good." Jed wiped sweat from his brow. "Mr. Dawson said they were headed north toward Raton Pass, sheriff's putting together a posse to go after them." Lucas nodded grimly. "Tell Clara I'll be back when I can," he said to Olivia, already striding toward the barn. Within minutes, he had saddled his horse and ridden out, the dust from his departure still hanging in the air as Olivia watched him go. "He'll be fine," Clara said, coming to stand beside her. "Lucas knows how to handle himself." Olivia turned, surprised by the certainty in Clara's voice. "Isn't it dangerous, going after cattle thieves?" "Dangerous, yes, but necessary. Out here we look after our own," Clara explained. "The Dawsons have been neighbors since we first settled. Lucas won't stand by while thieves take what they've worked their whole lives for." That evening, the house felt oddly empty without Lucas's quiet presence. After dinner, Tom rode out to gather news, returning an hour later with an update. "They tracked the rustlers to a camp near the pass," he reported. "Sheriff's planning to move in at dawn. Lucas and the others are waiting about a mile back." Clara nodded, her hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen in a protective gesture. "They'll be careful. Lucas has too much sense to take foolish risks." Olivia wasn't so sure. The determined set of Lucas's jaw as he'd ridden out suggested a man who might put justice above personal safety. She slept poorly that night, her dreams troubled by images of violence and loss that blended memories of her past with fears for the present. She woke before dawn, the house still silent around her. Unable to return to sleep, she rose and dressed, making her way to the kitchen to start the coffee and breakfast preparations. Clara joined her shortly after, looking as though she'd slept no better. "You're up early," she observed, tying on her apron. "I thought I'd get a head start on the day," Olivia replied, not wanting to admit her worry for a man she barely knew. They worked in companionable silence, the routine of breakfast preparation a comfort against the uncertainty of the day ahead. Tom joined them as the sun was rising, his expression grim. "Any word?" Clara asked immediately. He shook his head. "Nothing yet. I'm going to ride into town after breakfast, see if there's news." They had just sat down to eat when the sound of hooves approached the house. Clara was on her feet instantly, rushing to the door. Olivia followed, her heart inexplicably pounding in her chest. Lucas dismounted slowly, his movements stiff with exhaustion. There was dust and what looked like dried blood on his shirt, but he appeared uninjured. "Lucas." Clara cried, hurrying down the steps. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," he assured her, accepting her quick embrace. "Just tired, been in the saddle most of the night." "And the rustlers?" Tom asked from the porch. "Caught them. 3 men, all wanted in Kansas and Texas. They'll hang most likely." Lucas's voice was flat, devoid of satisfaction. "Old man Dawson's holding on, but it doesn't look good." He climbed the steps to the porch, nodding to Olivia as he passed. "Morning, Miss Langley." "Mr. Vance," she replied, suddenly aware of how worried she'd been. "There's hot coffee and breakfast waiting." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That might be the best news I've heard all day." Over breakfast, Lucas provided more details about the confrontation with the rustlers. There had been a brief gunfight, with one of the posse members wounded, but the thieves had eventually surrendered when they realized they were outnumbered. "Sheriff's holding them in the Trinidad jail until the circuit judge arrives next week," he concluded. "The Dawsons will get their cattle back at least." After the meal, Lucas excused himself to get some rest, the strain of the past 24 hours evident in the weary lines of his face. As he headed toward his bedroom, Olivia found herself watching him go, struck by the quiet strength that seemed to define him. "He's a good man," Clara said softly, coming to stand beside her. "Too good sometimes, takes on everyone's troubles as his own." "I can see that," Olivia replied. He seems to care deeply about this community. Clara studied her with knowing eyes, and the community cares about him, especially certain members of it, I think. Olivia felt her cheeks warm. I hardly know him. Maybe not, Clara agreed. But sometimes you don't need to know all of a person's story to recognize their worth. She squeezed Olivia's arm gently, just something to think about. The next day brought news that Wilson Dawson had died of his wounds. The entire ranch fell under a somber cloud as Lucas rode out to pay his respects to the widow and offer whatever help the family needed. Mr. Dawson was one of the first to welcome us when we came to Colorado, Clara explained as she and Olivia prepared food to send to the grieving family. He helped Pa get this place started, loaned us equipment and some of his best breeding stock when we were just beginning. I'm so sorry, Olivia said, recognizing the genuine grief in Clara's voice. It's the way of things out here sometimes, Clara sighed. Life is precious and often too short. Which is why you can't waste time wondering and waiting when it comes to matters of the heart. Olivia looked up sharply, but Clara had already turned away, humming softly as she wrapped a freshly baked loaf of bread. The following Sunday, nearly the entire community gathered for Wilson Dawson's funeral. Olivia sat between Clara and Tom in the small church, acutely aware of Lucas on Clara's other side, his profile solemn as the preacher spoke of Dawson's life and legacy. After the service, there was a gathering at the Dawson Ranch, with neighbors bringing food and offering comfort to the widow and her grown children. Olivia found herself standing awkwardly on the edge of the crowd, still very much an outsider despite her connection to the Vance family. Not much for crowds, Lucas's voice came from behind her, startling her slightly. Not when I know so few people, she admitted, turning to face him. He was dressed in his Sunday best, a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders well, with a crisp white shirt and string tie. You could remedy that, he suggested. Clara tells me you haven't been into town since that first day. Olivia tensed, memories of the rejection she'd faced in Trinidad still fresh. I haven't had reason to go. Lucas studied her for a moment. The folks who turned you away that day did so based on gossip and suspicion. They don't know you, he paused. I'd be happy to introduce you around properly if you'd like, might make things easier. His offer touched her unexpectedly. That's very kind, but I'm not sure it would make a difference. Some stains don't wash away so easily. Whatever happened in Boston, Olivia, it doesn't define who you are here, Lucas said, his voice low and earnest. I've watched you these past weeks. I've seen your care for Clara, your dedication to your work, your kindness even to the strays Tom's forever bringing home. A small smile touched his lips. Those things tell me more about your character than any gossip or rumor ever could. Olivia felt something shift inside her, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. Thank you for saying that. I only say what's true, he replied simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, would you walk with me? There's someone I'd like you to meet. Curious, Olivia nodded, falling into step beside him as they moved through the crowd. Lucas guided her toward an elderly woman sitting in a rocking chair on the porch, her wizened face lined with grief but her eyes bright and alert. Mrs. Dawson, Lucas said, approaching with respect. May I introduce Miss Olivia Langley? She's been helping Clara at the ranch. The old woman's keen eyes assessed Olivia. So you're the Boston girl everyone's been whispering about. She patted the chair beside her. Sit down, child. My Wilson always said you can't judge a book by what others say about it. You have to read it yourself. Relieved by the welcome, Olivia sat and soon found herself engaged in conversation with the widow. Martha Dawson had a wealth of stories about the early days of Trinidad and seemed genuinely interested in Olivia's impressions of Colorado. It's beautiful, Olivia admitted. So different from the East, everything feels bigger somehow, more open. Room to breathe, Mrs. Dawson nodded. Room to become who you're meant to be, not who others expect. She glanced at Lucas, who had remained nearby. That one understands, came here carrying his own burdens but found his place. Lucas shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. Mrs. Dawson gives me too much credit. Nonsense, the old woman said firmly. You're as fine a man as my Wilson was, Lucas Vance. just lacking a good woman to share it all with. Olivia felt her cheeks warm at the blunt assessment, but Lucas merely smiled, neither confirming nor denying the widow's statement. As they took their leave a short while later, Olivia found herself curious about Mrs. Dawson's comment. "What did she mean, about you carrying burdens when you came here?" Lucas was quiet for a moment as they walked toward the wagon where Clara and Tom were waiting. "The war left marks on a lot of us," he said finally. "Some visible, some not. I came west looking for a fresh start, same as many others. And did you find it? Your fresh start?" He glanced down at her, his dark eyes thoughtful. "I found something worth building a life around." "That's enough for most days." Before Olivia could respond, Clara called out to them, waving from the wagon. The moment for further conversation passed, but Olivia found herself thinking about Lucas's words long after they had returned to the ranch. The weeks that followed brought a subtle shift in Olivia's relationship with Lucas. He began making more time to be present at meals, often lingering afterward to share stories about the day's work or ask about hers. Sometimes in the evenings, when the day's work was done, he would join her on the porch where she often sat watching the sunset, and they would talk about books they had read, places they had seen, dreams they still harbored. Olivia found herself looking forward to these conversations, to the quiet understanding that seemed to grow between them. Lucas never pressed her about her past, and she extended him the same courtesy, sensing that some wounds were still too tender to probe. Clara watched their developing friendship with barely disguised satisfaction, often finding reasons to leave them alone together. "I'm not being subtle, am I?" she admitted to Olivia one afternoon as they prepared dinner. "But honestly, I've never seen my brother so at ease with anyone outside the family." "We're just friends," Olivia protested, though her heart quickened at Clara's implications. "Of course," Clara agreed, her smile knowing. "Just like Tom and I were just friends for 3 years before he finally got around to proposing." Despite her denials, Olivia couldn't ignore the growing warmth she felt whenever Lucas was near. It wasn't just gratitude for his kindness, though that remained. It was something deeper, a recognition of the man beneath the cowboy exterior, thoughtful, principled, and possessed of a quiet strength that drew her like a compass to true north. One evening in late June, nearly 2 months after Olivia's arrival at the Double V, Lucas found her in her usual spot on the porch. The day had been unusually hot, but a cool breeze was now stirring, bringing relief as the sun sank toward the horizon. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. "I'd welcome the company," she replied, accepting the offered cup with a smile. Lucas settled into the chair beside her, his gaze on the distant mountains. "Clara tells me you've been teaching her to make those fancy Boston desserts you mentioned." Olivia laughed. "I'm trying, though I'm not sure my attempt at Charlotte Russe was entirely successful. Tom seemed to enjoy it nonetheless." "Tom would eat a boot if it was covered in sugar," Lucas chuckled. "But it's good to see Clara so happy. She's missed having another woman to talk to since Ma passed." "I've enjoyed her company as well," Olivia said sincerely. "Both of you have made me feel—" She hesitated, searching for the right word. "Welcome, at home. I hadn't expected that." Lucas turned to look at her, his expression serious. "You belong here, Olivia, more than you might realize." The simple statement touched something deep within her, a longing for connection that she had suppressed since the scandal that had torn her from her previous life. "I want to tell you," she said suddenly, "about why I left Boston." "You deserve to know who you've taken into your home." "You don't owe me any explanations," Lucas said gently. "Perhaps not, but I want you to understand." Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I was engaged to be married to a man named Edward Blackwood. He was from a good family, respectable, charming, everything a proper Boston girl should want." Her fingers tightened around her cup. "But Edward had appetites that weren't satisfied by the prospect of marriage to a naive girl from a good family." Lucas remained silent, his steady presence encouraging her to continue. "There was another woman, several, as it turned out. When I discovered his infidelity and confronted him, he denied everything, claimed I was being hysterical." The bitterness of the memory still had the power to sting. When I persisted, he spread rumors that I was unstable, that I had fabricated the whole affair due to some emotional defect. And people believed him, Lucas surmised, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Olivia nodded. Edward was very convincing, and his family had influence. One by one, my friends began to distance themselves. Even my own parents questioned my sanity. She swallowed hard. Then came the final blow. Edward announced his engagement to the daughter of one of Boston's most prominent families, all while continuing to publicly paint me as a jilted woman who had lost her mind from disappointment. "So you left," Lucas concluded quietly. "I had to." There was nothing left for me there except shame and pity. Olivia looked down at her hands. "I took what little money I had saved and bought a ticket west as far as I could afford. Trinidad was meant to be just a stopping point, but here you are," Lucas finished for her, reaching out to cover her hand with his own. His palm was warm and calloused, the touch unexpectedly comforting. "Here I am," she agreed, daring to meet his gaze. Does it change how you see me?" Lucas's expression softened. "The only thing that changes is my admiration for your courage, Olivia, to leave everything you knew to start over alone. That takes remarkable strength." Relief washed over her at his words. "Thank you for listening, for not judging." "I've no right to judge anyone," Lucas said, his voice dropping slightly. "We all carry things we're not proud of." In the fading light, his features were partially shadowed, but Olivia could see the hint of old pain in his eyes. "Will you tell me," she asked softly, "about your burdens?" For a moment she thought he might refuse, retreat behind the careful reserve he maintained with most people. But then he nodded slowly. "Fair's fair, I suppose." He released her hand reluctantly and leaned back in his chair, his gaze returning to the darkening horizon. "I fought for the Union," he began, "joined up in '63 after my 18th birthday, saw things no young man should see, did things." He shook his head. "War changes a person, Olivia, strips away illusions." "I can only imagine," she said softly. "After Appomattox, I couldn't go back to our farm in Illinois. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. I was angry all the time, couldn't sleep without seeing faces of men I'd killed." His voice was steady, but Olivia could hear the echoes of old pain beneath the words. Pa understood better than most. He'd fought in Mexico years before and recognized the signs. When he suggested we sell up and head west for a fresh start, I agreed right away. "And that decision brought you here," Lucas nodded. "Colorado was still mostly wilderness then. We bought this land cheap from a prospector who'd failed to find gold and wanted out. Built the house with our own hands, started with a dozen head of cattle and big dreams." A small smile touched his lips at the memory. "Clara thought we were crazy at first, but she came around." "She's always been adaptable, my sister." "She's remarkable," Olivia agreed. "You both are." Lucas's gaze returned to her, his expression softening. "The war taught me to recognize what matters, Olivia: honor, loyalty, truth. I see those qualities in you, whatever that fool in Boston failed to value." His words warmed her from within, chasing away old hurts and doubts. "I'm beginning to think coming to Trinidad wasn't just desperation," she said quietly. "Perhaps it was Providence." "Perhaps it was," Lucas agreed, his voice deepening slightly. For a moment, Olivia thought he might say more, might even reach for her hand again, but the moment was broken by Clara calling them in for supper. The air between them had changed, though, charged with unspoken possibilities that lingered in glances across the dinner table, and in the careful distance they now maintained, as if both were afraid of what might happen if they drew too close. July brought scorching heat, and the promise of a bountiful harvest from the small kitchen garden Clara and Olivia tended. It also brought word that the circuit judge had arrived in Trinidad, and the trial of Wilson Dawson's killers would begin the following week. "Will you have to testify?" Olivia asked Lucas as they sat at the breakfast table, concern evident in her voice. He nodded, cutting into the stack of hot cakes Clara had placed before him. "Sheriffs called all the posse members as witnesses. Shouldn't take more than a day or two." "Those men will hang," Tom said matter-of-factly. "Cut and dried case. They were caught with stolen cattle and Dawson's blood still on their clothes." Clara shuddered. I know they deserve it, but I hate the thought of anyone dancing at the end of a rope. Justice isn't always pretty, Lucas said, his expression grim, but it's necessary. Without it, men like that would run roughshod over decent folks trying to build something worthwhile. Olivia thought about Edward Blackwood, who had destroyed her reputation with lies and suffered no consequences for his actions. Sometimes justice is hard to come by, even in civilized society. Lucas's gaze met hers, understanding in his dark eyes. True enough. But out here we try to keep things simple. A man's word is his bond, and actions have consequences. The morning Lucas was to ride into town for the trial, Olivia found herself unusually anxious. She had spent enough time in his company now to recognize the signs of tension in the set of his shoulders and the tightness around his mouth as he saddled his horse. "Will you be back tonight?" she asked, standing in the barn doorway. "Hope to be," he replied, adjusting the cinch. "Depends on how long the proceedings take. Please be careful," she said, surprising herself with the intensity of her concern. Lucas paused in his preparations, turning to face her fully. "The danger's past, Olivia. The rustlers are in custody, and Trinidad's as peaceful as it gets these days." "I know, it's just—" She hesitated, suddenly unsure of herself. "I worry," his expression softened. "I'll be fine, promise." After a brief hesitation, he added, "There's a social on Saturday after the trial's concluded, town's way of getting back to normal after all this unpleasantness." "Would you? That is, I thought you might like to go with me." Olivia's heart leaped at the invitation, even as anxiety twisted in her stomach. "I'm not sure I'd be welcome in town." "You would be with me," Lucas said simply, his certainty touching her deeply. "Then yes," she decided, pushing aside her fears. "I'd like that very much." His smile was worth any risk of public censure. "Good, that's good." He swung up into the saddle, suddenly seeming almost boyish in his pleasure. "I'll see you tonight, then." Olivia watched him ride away, her emotions a confusing tangle of hope and apprehension. A social meant facing the town that had rejected her, but it also meant an evening in Lucas's company, not as his employee or his sister's companion, but as something more. "He finally asked you, did he?" Clara's voice came from behind her, tinged with satisfaction. Olivia turned, unable to suppress a smile. "You knew he was planning to. Lucas has been working up the courage for weeks," Clara confirmed, linking her arm through Olivia's as they walked back to the house. "I thought I might have to intervene if he delayed much longer." "I'm not sure it's wise," Olivia admitted. "The people in town will have to adjust their thinking," Clara finished firmly. "You've earned your place here, Olivia, and Lucas doesn't give his heart easily. If he's chosen you, it means something. Has he given his heart?" Olivia wondered, both thrilled and terrified by the possibility. It seemed too much to hope for that this honorable, steadfast man might come to care for her as more than a friend or employee. The trial proceeded as expected. Lucas returned that evening with news that the rustlers had been found guilty and sentenced to hang the following morning. There was no satisfaction in his voice as he related the outcome, just a somber acceptance that justice, harsh though it might be, had been served. Martha Dawson was there, he told them as they sat around the dinner table. Said she wanted to look in the eyes of the men who took her husband from her, brave woman. "Will you attend the hanging?" Tom asked. Lucas shook his head. "I've seen enough death to last a lifetime. Justice doesn't require me to witness one more." Olivia found herself relieved by his answer. There was no bloodthirst in Lucas, despite the hard justice of the frontier. It was one more quality to admire in a man who seemed to grow in her estimation with each passing day. Saturday dawned clear and hot, the kind of summer day that shimmered with heat by mid-morning. Clara had insisted on altering one of her dresses for Olivia to wear to the social, a pretty green calico that brought out the auburn highlights in her hair. "You look beautiful," Clara declared as she helped Olivia arrange her hair. "Lucas won't be able to take his eyes off you." "I'm more concerned about the rest of the town," Olivia confessed, nervously smoothing the skirt of the borrowed dress. "Let them talk," Clara said dismissively. "Half the gossips in Trinidad are just jealous they didn't snag Lucas themselves. The other half will come around once they get to know you." Lucas and Tom were waiting in the main room, both dressed in their Sunday best. The appreciation in Lucas's eyes as he took in Olivia's appearance was unmistakable, sending a flush of pleasure through her. "You look lovely," he said simply, offering his arm. "Thank you," she replied, accepting the gesture with a smile that belied her inner nervousness. "You're very handsome yourself." The ride into Trinidad was filled with Clara's cheerful chatter about who would be at the social and what gossip they might hear, while Tom occasionally interjected with droll observations about the more colorful townspeople. Lucas remained mostly quiet, but Olivia was acutely aware of his presence beside her on the wagon seat, solid and reassuring. The social was being held in the town square, with tables of food set up under canvas awnings and lanterns strung between trees to provide light as evening approached. A small group of musicians was already playing, and several couples were dancing on a wooden platform erected for the occasion. Olivia felt the weight of curious stares as they arrived, heard the murmur of conversation pause momentarily before resuming with renewed vigor. She stiffened, but Lucas's hand at the small of her back steadied her. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "They'll find something new to gossip about before the night's over." The evening progressed better than Olivia had dared to hope. Clara introduced her around, emphasizing her role at the ranch and her friendship with the family in a way that made it clear Olivia was under their protection. Some of the townspeople remained cool, but others were friendly, particularly after Martha Dawson made a point of greeting Olivia warmly. "That young woman has more dignity in her little finger than most people have in their whole bodies," the widow announced loudly enough for nearby gossips to hear. "Lucas Vance has always had good judgment, and I trust his choice of company." The endorsement from such a respected member of the community went a long way toward easing tensions, and Olivia found herself gradually relaxing, even enjoying the simple pleasure of community celebration. As dusk fell and the lanterns were lit, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Lucas approached her where she stood talking with Clara and several other women. "May I have this dance?" he asked, offering his hand. Olivia hesitated only briefly before placing her fingers in his. "I'd be delighted." The musicians were playing a waltz, and Olivia was surprised to discover that Lucas was a competent dancer, guiding her smoothly through the steps with a confidence that belied his usual reserve. "You dance well," she observed, looking up at him with a smile. "Ma insisted both Tom and I learn," he admitted. "Said no son of hers would be a complete heathen, frontier or not. She was a wise woman." "She would have liked you," Lucas said, his voice warming. "Said I needed someone with spirit and sense in equal measure." His hold on her waist tightened slightly. She wasn't wrong. Olivia's heart quickened at the implication in his words. "Lucas, I'm not good with fancy speeches, Olivia," he said, his gaze intent on her face, "but these past months, having you at the ranch, getting to know you, it's meant something to me, more than I expected." "It's meant something to me too," she admitted softly. "You saw worth in me when I couldn't see it in myself." "It was always there," Lucas said. "All I did was recognize it." They danced in silence for a moment, the space between them charged with unspoken emotions. Around them, other couples swirled in time to the music, the town's celebration continuing unabated. But Olivia was aware only of Lucas, the strength of his arms, the warmth of his gaze, the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "I'm falling in love with you," he said suddenly, the words simple and direct, characteristic of the man himself. "I don't expect anything in return. It's too soon, I know that, but I wanted you to know where I stand." Olivia's breath caught, joy and fear mingling in her chest. After Edward's betrayal, she had sworn never to trust her heart to another man, yet here she was, dancing under the stars with a cowboy who had seen past her shame to the woman beneath. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "Not for what I'm feeling." The smile that transformed Lucas's features was worth every moment of heartache that had led her to this place, this man. "Then may I court you properly, Miss Langley, with Clara as chaperone and all the proprieties observed?" Olivia laughed softly, happiness bubbling up inside her. "Yes, Mr. Vance. I would like that very much." The music ended, but Lucas kept hold of her hand as they left the dance floor, his fingers twined with hers in a gesture that announced his intentions to the watching town more clearly than any words could have done. Clara's delighted expression when she saw them approaching hand in hand confirmed that their changed relationship was evident to those who knew them best. "Well, it's about time," she declared, not bothering to lower her voice. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the root cellar to get any results." "Clara," Tom admonished, though his own smile betrayed his approval. Lucas laughed, the sound rich and unrestrained in a way Olivia had rarely heard from him. "Some things can't be rushed, little sister." "And some things take entirely too long," Clara retorted, her hands resting on her now visible pregnancy. "Life's short, as we've all been reminded recently." "We've come to our understanding in our own time," Lucas said, his thumb brushing lightly over Olivia's knuckles where their hands remained joined. "That's what matters." The rest of the evening passed in a haze of happiness for Olivia. They danced again, shared pieces of Martha Dawson's famous apple pie, and talked with friends and neighbors who seemed increasingly accepting of Olivia's presence in their midst. By the time they climbed back into the wagon for the ride home, Olivia felt as though she had crossed an invisible threshold, no longer an outsider, but a woman who belonged. The courtship that followed was conducted with all the propriety Clara could enforce, despite her obvious impatience for her brother and friend to get on with it, as she frequently put it. Lucas took Olivia on proper outings, rides across the ranch to show her favorite spots, picnics by the creek that ran along the property's eastern boundary, occasional trips into town for supplies that somehow always included time for coffee at the hotel restaurant. They talked for hours during these outings, sharing stories of their childhoods, dreams for the future, and the daily observations that revealed their deepening understanding of each other. Olivia learned that Lucas had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he was truly comfortable, that he loved poetry despite his practical nature, and that he harbored a secret passion for breeding horses that he hoped to pursue once the cattle operation was more established. Lucas, in turn, discovered Olivia's quick mind and education, her talent for sketching that she had let lapse during her troubles, and her surprisingly practical approach to problems despite her genteel upbringing. "You would have made a fine rancher's daughter," he told her one afternoon as they sat by the creek, watching the water flow past. "You've adapted to life here better than most Eastern women would." "Perhaps because I wanted so badly for it to work," Olivia admitted. The alternative was unthinkable. Lucas picked up a small stone, turning it over in his fingers. "And now, is staying here still just the better alternative, or is it what you want?" Olivia considered the question carefully. "When I first arrived, I was running away from shame and heartbreak. I would have gone anywhere that offered escape." She looked at him, allowing her feelings to show plainly in her face. "Now I'm exactly where I want to be with exactly who I want to be with." The kiss that followed was their first gentle and questioning at first, then deepening as Olivia responded with equal fervor. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Olivia Langley," he said simply. "I think I started falling the moment I found you in my stable, too proud to beg but too determined to give up." "And I love you," she replied, the words coming easily now that they had been set free, "for seeing value in me when I'd forgotten it was there. For giving me a chance when no one else would." He kissed her again, more briefly this time. "I should have asked this first, but will you marry me, be my wife, partner in whatever life brings us?" "Yes," Olivia answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." The news of their engagement was met with delight from Clara and Tom, and growing acceptance from the town as a whole. Martha Dawson insisted on hosting an engagement dinner, effectively silencing any remaining gossips by publicly embracing Olivia as the daughter I never had, and presenting her with a family quilt as an engagement gift. "Every bride needs something to start her household," the older woman declared. "This was to be for my Jenny when she married, but she and her husband have their own ways in Denver now. I'd like you to have it, child." "I'm honored," Olivia said sincerely, touching the intricate stitching of the star pattern. It's beautiful. Like the home you and Lucas will build together, Martha said with satisfaction. He's a good man, made better by loving you. I can see that plain as day. As summer turned to fall, wedding preparations occupied much of Olivia's time. Clara, despite her advancing pregnancy, threw herself into the planning with enthusiasm, determined that her brother and friend would have a celebration worthy of their love. Nothing too elaborate, Lucas protested when Clara began talking about ordering special decorations from Denver. Something simple like us. Simple doesn't mean plain, Clara argued, and this is the most exciting thing to happen in Trinidad since Tom and I got married, let people enjoy it. In the end, they compromised on a ceremony at the church, followed by a celebration at the ranch, with neighbors contributing food and music for the occasion. Olivia's dress was ordered from Denver, a concession to Clara's insistence that some things were worth the expense, while Lucas invested in a new suit that Clara declared made him look almost civilized. As the wedding day approached, Olivia found herself increasingly reflective, marveling at the journey that had brought her from despair to joy in the space of half a year. The shame that had driven her west had faded, replaced by a quiet pride in the life she was building and the love she had found. Having second thoughts, Lucas asked one evening, finding her on the porch in her usual spot, gazing at the stars. Not about us, she assured him, making room for him on the bench. I was just thinking about how much has changed since I arrived, how different my life is from what I imagined. Better or worse? He asked, though his smile suggested he knew the answer. Infinitely better, Olivia replied, leaning against his shoulder. I came here with nothing but shame and the clothes on my back. Now I have a home, a family. She looked up at him, her heart in her eyes. And a future with a man who sees me for who I truly am. Lucas's arm tightened around her shoulders. I see a woman of remarkable courage and grace, he said softly. A woman I'll be proud to call my wife. The wedding day dawned clear and cool, the first hints of autumn coloring the distant hills. Clara had insisted Olivia spend the night at Martha Dawson's house, declaring it bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the ceremony, a superstition Lucas had grumbled about but ultimately honored. You look absolutely beautiful, Clara declared, putting the finishing touches on Olivia's hair. The ivory dress, with its fitted bodice and modest train, complemented Olivia's slender figure perfectly, while her auburn hair was arranged in an elegant knot adorned with small white flowers. I feel beautiful, Olivia admitted, studying her reflection in Martha's mirror, and happy, so very happy. As you should be, Martha said, entering the room with a small box in her hands. Every bride needs something borrowed. These were my mother's. She opened the box to reveal a pair of pearl earrings, simple but elegant. Oh, Martha, Olivia breathed. They're lovely, but I couldn't possibly. You can and you will, Martha interrupted firmly. You've brought light back into this old woman's life, child. Let me do this small thing for you. Touched beyond words, Olivia carefully put on the earrings, completing her bridal ensemble. Thank you, she said, embracing the older woman carefully, for everything. The church was filled to capacity when Olivia arrived, the entire community having turned out for the occasion. Tom, as Lucas's best man, came to escort her inside, whistling appreciatively when he saw her. Lucas might just faint when he sees you, he teased. Never seen my brother-in-law so nervous as he's been this morning. Is he here? Olivia asked, suddenly anxious herself. Waiting at the altar, looking like he can't believe his luck, Tom confirmed. Ready to become Mrs. Vance, Olivia took a deep breath, centering herself. More than ready. The simple melody of Beautiful Dreamer filled the church as Olivia walked down the aisle on Tom's arm, but she was barely aware of the music or the faces turned toward her. Her attention was fixed on Lucas, standing tall and handsome at the altar, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awe as he saw her approach. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotion for Olivia, the warm pressure of Lucas's hands holding hers, the steady certainty in his voice as he repeated his vows, the weight of the simple gold band as he slipped it onto her finger. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas's kiss was both tender and passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. "Mrs. Vance," he murmured against her lips, his voice filled with wonder and joy. "Mr. Vance," she returned, her heart too full for more elaborate words. The celebration at the ranch lasted well into the evening with food and dancing and toasts to the new couple's happiness. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard where tables had been set up, Lucas found Olivia in conversation with several of the ranch wives. "May I steal my wife for a moment?" he asked, the pride evident in his voice as he said the word wife. "You'd better do more than steal her for a moment," one of the older women teased. "It's your wedding night, after all." Amid laughter and good-natured ribbing, Lucas led Olivia away from the crowd toward a quiet corner of the porch where they could see the celebration but have a moment of privacy. "Happy?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "Completely," she assured him, resting her head against his chest. "It's been a perfect day." "The first of many," Lucas promised, pressing a kiss to her hair. "I meant what I said in my vows, Olivia. I'll spend my life making sure you never regret choosing me, choosing this life." "I could never regret it," she said, lifting her face to his. "You gave me back myself, Lucas. You saw worth in me when I'd forgotten it was there." His kiss was gentle, reverent almost, and Olivia melted into it, secure in the knowledge that this man, her husband, would always see her clearly, always value her for exactly who she was. As evening deepened into night and the last of the guests departed, Lucas and Olivia stood on the porch of the small cabin he had built for them near the main house, watching as Tom and Clara drove away to give the newlyweds privacy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance," Lucas said, sweeping Olivia into his arms to carry her across the threshold. "Home," Olivia repeated softly, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I like the sound of that." The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The winter of '76 was harsh, testing the ranch's resources and the family's resilience. Spring brought renewal, a bumper crop of calves, Clara's healthy baby boy, and the first foal from Lucas's carefully selected breeding stock. Olivia took to ranch life with a determination that impressed even those who had known Lucas longest. She learned to ride expertly, to help with calving, to manage the household accounts with skill that reflected her Eastern education. When the opportunity arose to buy the adjacent property, it was Olivia who worked out the financing that made it possible, expanding the Double V to twice its original size. Their first child, a son they named William after Lucas's father, arrived in the summer of 1877, followed 2 years later by a daughter, Eleanor. Parenthood suited them, both, Lucas proving to be a devoted father who took as much pride in teaching his children to ride and rope as he did in running his increasingly prosperous ranch. In the spring of 1880, nearly 5 years after Olivia had first arrived in Trinidad with nothing but shame and desperation, she stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching as Lucas taught 5-year-old William to gentle a new colt. Eleanor, at 3, sat on the corral fence, clapping her hands in delight at her brother's success. "They're growing so fast," Clara remarked, joining Olivia with her own son perched on her hip. "Sometimes I can hardly believe how much has changed." "For the better," Olivia said, smiling as Lucas looked up and caught her eye, his love still evident in every glance. "You know," Clara said thoughtfully, "I remember the day Lucas brought you home. You looked so lost, so hurt. And now look at you, the heart of this family, the strongest woman I know." Olivia squeezed her sister-in-law's hand. "I found my strength here with all of you, especially with him." She nodded toward Lucas, who was now lifting Eleanor down from the fence, his strong hands gentle with his daughter. "He found something too," Clara observed, "a piece I wasn't sure he'd ever have after the war." As if sensing they were talking about him, Lucas glanced over again, then said something to the children before walking toward the house, his stride easy and confident. "What are you two conspiring about?" he asked as he reached the porch, leaning down to kiss Olivia lightly. "Just counting our blessings," Olivia replied, leaning into his embrace. Later that night, with the children asleep and the house quiet around them, Olivia and Lucas sat together on the porch swing, a habit they had maintained throughout their marriage. The stars were brilliant overhead, the air fragrant with spring blossoms. "I got a letter today," Lucas said, his arm draped comfortably around Olivia's shoulders. "From a lawyer in Boston." Olivia tensed slightly. "Oh, seems Edward Blackwood finally got what was coming to him," Lucas continued, his voice carefully neutral. "Caught embezzling from his father-in-law's company. There's quite the scandal, apparently." "I see," Olivia said, surprised by her own lack of emotion at the news. "I hope his wife isn't suffering too much for his actions." Lucas studied her face in the moonlight. "You truly don't care, do you?" "I stopped caring years ago," Olivia admitted. "What happened in Boston led me here, to you, to our children, to this life. How could I regret any of it?" Lucas's expression softened, love evident in every line of his face. "You arrived with nothing but shame," he murmured, echoing words she had once spoken to him. "And look at all you've built since then." "We built it together," Olivia corrected, reaching up to touch his face. "You saw worth in me when no one else did, Lucas. You made me your wife when others would have judged me for my past. Everything I am now, everything we have, grew from that moment." "I saw you," Lucas said simply. "The real you, beneath the hurt and shame. How could I not love what I saw?" Olivia kissed him then, pouring 5 years of love and gratitude into the gesture. When they parted, she rested her head on his shoulder, content in a way she had never imagined possible when she'd stepped off that stagecoach in Trinidad. "I have news too," she said after a comfortable silence. "I wasn't sure when to tell you, but—" Lucas turned to look at her, curiosity in his gaze. "What is it?" "Come December, William and Alina will have a new brother or sister," Olivia said, taking his hand and placing it over her still flat stomach. The joy that spread across Lucas's face was answer enough, but he gathered her close nonetheless, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, "Another blessing I never thought to have." "One of many," Olivia agreed, snuggling closer to the man who had seen her true worth and made her his wife. "And there will be more to come, I'm certain of it." As they sat together under the vast Colorado sky, Olivia Vance reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place, this man, this life filled with love and purpose. The shame that had once defined her had long since faded, replaced by the pride of being Lucas's wife, the mother of his children, and a woman who had found her strength in the wild beauty of the western frontier. It wasn't the life she had been raised to expect, but it was infinitely better, richer in meaning, deeper in love, and more fulfilling than anything her younger self could have imagined. From desperation had come hope, from shame had come redemption, and from the kindness of a cowboy who saw beyond appearances had come a love that would last a lifetime.